Can I welcome everybody to this meeting of North Lanarkshire Council. Before we go to the business of the meeting, I would like to remind you of the functionality which will assist with the smooth running of the meeting. Unless you're speaking, can all members please ensure that the microphone is muted? If you've declared an interest in a particular item of business, the clerk will remove you from the meeting to the lobby and reinstate you once the item of business has been dealt with. Can I remind members that if you wish to declare an interest during the meeting, please type in DEC in the chat bar and hit return. If you wish to raise a point of order, please type into the chat bar PO and hit return. If you wish to ask a question, please hit the space bar in the chat bar and then press return, and the clerk will notify me of the order of speakers for each individual item. Please do not use the chat bar for any other purposes. Colleagues, can I remind you that the meeting is being live streamed through the Council's YouTube channel and is publicly available. The meeting will be available afterwards as an archived record. Colleagues, before we go to the meeting, you will have received notice of the sad news that Mary Castles, former Assistant Chief Executive and Executive Director of Housing and Social Work Services, has passed away. Mary was also the wife of Councillor Castles, the Deputy Provost. On behalf of the Council, I would like to express our condolences to Tom and his family at this difficult time, and I have sent a card and flowers on behalf of the Council today. I have a note of apologies here. Councillors Anderson, Castles, Goldsack, Kerr, Morgan, Sophia Coyle, Feeney and Councillor Lennon, but he does hope to join in the meeting later on today. Are there any other apologies? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Lennon, I'm here.
All right, I was told you weren't sure if you would get in for the full meeting, so that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Provost, Councillor Shields has intimated that he potentially won't make it, but he'll try his best.
Thank you very much.
Provost, if I can put in a apology for Councillor Curry as well, please.
Thank you very much. Can we move on to the agenda? Agenda item 1 is declarations of interest in terms of ethical standards in Public Life Scotland Act. Are there any declarations of interest?
I've got one, Jean.
Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Provost. I believe I should declare an interest in item 3 as a registered council tenant, though I believe I'm still under the ethical standards, still able to take part.
Thanks very much. Archie, you've indicated you wanted to come in.
Thanks, Provost. And yes, I can confirm that Councillor Cameron's quite correct. His status as a council tenant wouldn't preclude him from participating. I just wonder, Provost, if I could take this opportunity to highlight something to members arising from the revised Councillors' Code of Conduct that I had last week. And it's a subtle change in the wording around declarations of interest. The focus now in the section 5 from memory of the revised code that deals with declarations, that there's now a focus in the word connection. So do you have a connection with a particular issue, person, organisation, etc.? I'm sure members will have looked at this already, but just for the purposes of declarations for this meeting, just to highlight it, that if you have a connection, but you don't think that connection is so significant that it precludes you participating and voting on the item, then the code, in terms of the guidance to the code, is suggesting at paragraph 166 that you would say that you have a connection to the item, you give the reason for the connection, and then go on to say that, however, having applied the objective test, you don't consider that you've got any interest to declare. So we're stopping referring to it being an interest if the member intends to participate. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fisher.
Thanks, Provost. I'd just like to declare an interest in item number 5 as a member of the Strathclyde Pension Fund Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's no other declarations of interest been indicated in the bar. Agenda item 2 is minutes of meetings of committees, subcommittees and panels for cycle 4. In accordance with Standing Order 21, the volume of minutes has been issued to you. There are 2 C paragraphs on page 48 and page 78. Can we approve the volume of minutes, including the C paragraphs, unless anyone is otherwise minded? Thank you very much. Agenda item 3 is the housing revenue estimates for 2022-23. There is a report by the Executive Director of Enterprise and Communities presenting information that will enable the Council to set its housing revenue account budget for 2022-23. Can I have a proposition? Councillor Brannan McVeigh.
Thank you, Provost. I would like to move the rent motion for year 22-23. As I do this, Provost, I would first like to express my gratitude to the staff of the Housing Service and our partner services and others. Together, we've achieved much in the last year, with a backdrop of immense challenge from the pandemic and its restrictions. In spite of it all, Housing Services are supporting tenants, raising the standard of housing and driving forward regeneration and ambition in North Lanarkshire. Staff have continued to deliver key and essential services, not just to our most vulnerable tenants, but supporting all our tenants during this time. Staff have found new ways of working and connecting with their communities, and they have helped to tackle social isolation too. I would like to convey my gratitude too to North Lanarkshire Tenants Federation and our local tenants and residents organisations and individuals across North Lanarkshire who have worked with us to shape our priorities through the local area housing strategy and to inform our policy. They are valued a sounding board and a critical friend in many areas of work. There has been significant work done in sustaining tenancies and preventing homelessness over the last year. There has also been North Lanarkshire Council's groundbreaking Universal Credit Assistance Fund, providing that essential lifeline to tenants experiencing hardship while waiting on a claim to be processed. This engagement process has enabled our staff to build relationships and better support our tenants. This brought wider income maximising efforts, and with work continuing with financial inclusion, we are tackling poverty and hardship daily, making sure that our tenants not only receive what they're entitled to, but they also have access to the supports that have been created and designed by our council too. Sadly, we are all aware that domestic violence has increased during periods of lockdown and beyond. The service took quick action to provide housing solutions to support those who are in most need. Provost, there is a motion written, and I hope it has been circulated to members so that they can see the detail of what I am sharing today. Can you confirm that that has happened, Provost?
Provost, I have the motion here and I can share it up on screen for people to see it. It's contained on one screen, so I'll share that now if that's okay.
Thank you.
And email it out at the same time.
Thank you. I'd be most grateful. I'm not going to read it all because you will be able to see it for yourself, but I would just like to highlight some of the service highlights in advance of me getting into the detail of the rent proposition in particular. We look at the housing revenue account today, but we also recognise the programme of housing and support that's taken place at previous budget decisions, increasing the Council's target for new supply from 2,150 by 2027 to 5,600 by 2035, the completion of 847 new build homes with a further 325 on site, and with the sites that we have identified at a variety of stages of progression, we have a further 1,281 homes in development. You know that we already have the expansion of the buyback scheme too, and of course we have approved our tower reprovisioning programme. I would like to highlight in particular the record investment of the 5-year capital mainstream programme from 21-22 to 25-26. While this delivers the 154 million of investment of the council's housing stock, a 20% increase in the previous 5 years. This particularly includes 138 million of funding aimed at improving energy and carbon efficiency across our estate. Never has a time been more important to recognise that. In the last year, capital works and repairs have carried on or continued as restrictions allowed. The service has worked incredibly hard to be flexible and has reprofiled work to make sure that no priorities were missed, and I'm exceptionally grateful to them for that, and I know our tenants are too. Our tower reprovisioning programme is transforming the skyline of North Lanarkshire. The first phase is ahead of schedule, and we have 4 tower blocks demolished already, with sites cleared and building work underway. It's been great to see tenants settled into new homes recently at 2 of our newest new build sites at Lismore Drive and at Dimsdale. Any tenant that I have visited has been beyond happy with their new home. They're delighted with the space standards and the quality of finish. But colleagues, today I would like to propose a rental increase of 3% for 22-23. This is a below inflation increase, and it will allow for the continuation of high quality service provision by the housing service and the maintenance of our existing plans for capital investment to meet new quality standards and the provision of new supply and our tower reprovisioning programme. This equates to an average rent of £76.46. I understand that any increase will be felt by households across North Lanarkshire, and we've tried to find a balance of maintaining the high quality services that our tenants expect and the support mechanisms that they value, while taking cognizance of the challenges and the increasing costs of the cost of living. I urge any tenant who faces any form of challenge to contact their housing office for support. I recognise that a significant number of our housing tenants are in receipt of either housing benefit or universal credit, where the impact of the annual rent increase will not affect their income levels or may have a limited impact on them. By way of contingency, colleagues, I would urge that we maintain the core contingency reserve representing 1% of the HRA. That's approximately 1.5 million. Colleagues, I move the motion. I seek your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Alan Valentine, I understand you're seconding this motion.
That's correct, Provost.
If you want to speak now, thank you.
Okay, just a couple of things. Obviously, the convener's covered most of the things, but I'll just put a couple of notes on it that I drew up myself. Today, I will second this motion for the 3% rent increase for 1 year only. This below inflation rise will aid our tenants after 4 years of above inflation rises. It will also allow the department to keep financing the excellent Universal Credit Assistance Fund, which has allowed over 4,000 tenants to be supported that would otherwise have fallen into arrears. It has also meant that the rent arrears position for the department has changed very little since April 2020, excuse me, demonstrating the positive impact of the fund. A rise will also allow the department to deal with the current cost pressures of inflation, employee costs and funding capital investment. Happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Douglas, you've come into the chat bar.
Yeah, thank you for this. It was just a quick question. I was just to make sure everything was correct. On paper, on 2.2, it says a rental increase of 3.05%. Is that what the figure should be, or is it supposed to be 3%? I was just to obviously make sure that it's accurate, because it says that the bridge the funding gap would be 3.05%. Thank you.
Can you answer that, Councillor Brandon McVeigh? Will I ask an officer to answer it who wrote the report?
I'm happy to go to the officer for information, but certainly the consensus that Councillor Valentine and I had reached is it would be 3%.
Is Elaine?
Yeah, Provost. Yep. Sorry, I'm on the call. If you want, Stephen Llewellyn.
Elaine indicated she would come in and clarify this, but if she can't clarify it, I'll let you in, Stephen.
Okay.
Thanks, Provost. Thank you, Provost. At the time of writing, the level of increase to balance the budget was estimated at 3.05%, but since then we've adjusted the funding that was set aside for loan charges, and that's given the projected underspend in the current year capital programme So 3% I can confirm is sufficient to balance the budget.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone otherwise minded? So can we agree to go with the motion from Councillor Brannan McVeigh, seconded by Councillor Alan Valentine?
Agreed.
Agenda item 4 is memberships of committees, subcommittees, panels and outside bodies. Colleagues, the list of proposed amendments has been issued to you in advance of the meeting. Can we agree the proposed amendments?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 5 is a notice of motion from Councillor Goldie and Councillor London. There is no amendment indicated to your motion. Do you still wish to speak, Councillor Goldie?
Yes, Provost, briefly. Okay, right. Thank you, Provost. I'm happy to have the support of every North Lanarkshire councillor for this motion, and I will begin by highlighting some of the information sent to me by Friends of the Earth on this issue. Pension funds have a duty to look after their members in retirement, but as some of the largest investors in the world, pension funds also have a profound capacity to shape the future that we retire into. The climate crisis is forcing workers, pensioners, investors and policymakers to consider if and how their money is making a difference. In Scotland, the local government pension scheme, valued at 48 billion and administered by 11 local authorities, constitutes the country's largest public store of wealth. New analysis carried out by Platform shows that of March 2020, Scottish local council pensions invested 1.2 billion in fossil fuels. The biggest investor in Scotland is also the country's single biggest local government fund, the Strathclyde Pension Fund. It was found to have invested 508 million in fossil fuel companies, 42% of the Scottish total. The local government pension scheme has 6.8 million members across the UK, and this analysis shows on average each individual member has £1,450 invested in fossil fuels. Friends of the Earth also illustrate how we as a council can address this. For example, they quote that in Glasgow, the City Administration Committee have since underscored their commitment to divest by signing the C40 declaration. This global initiative commits Glasgow to increase their investments in climate solutions and the green economy and to divest municipal investments from fossil fuel companies, as well as to encourage the city or other relevant pension fund to develop a policy to divest from fossil fuel companies as part of the wider climate risk management strategy. As you're all aware, North Lanarkshire Council in 2019 declared a climate emergency, and we have subsequently made progress in several areas, including the rollout of electrical vehicle charging points and the setting of heat efficiency targets across the council estate, as well as many other initiatives. We have been innovative in many areas. For example, this year North Lanarkshire Council hosted a series of Act 21 conferences in the run-up to COP26. These conferences were positively received by staff, local businesses, pupils, teachers and others who took part and contributed. I understand that our final event, which involved our schools, was one of, if not indeed the largest online event set against the background of COP26. Our work so far should be commended, but we must progress further. For example, previously at Council, we agreed that every council and committee agenda item must augment the details of any environmental impact with its carbon impact. This is beginning to be incorporated into some reports, but not all. However, it should not only be down to what we do as a council, but also through our investment in Strathclyde Pension Fund. Through our representation, there is an opportunity to influence the fund and encourage divestment in fossil fuels. As stated earlier, the important aspect is not just to move away from investing in fossil fuels, but to look to the future and to use our contribution to the fund to invest in a greener economy, enhancing the drive to net zero. A request from us for information on the current position will give us a baseline and hopefully an indication of the proposed direction of travel of the scheme. I hope that this motion will be a driver for change and it will encourage the fund to ensure that our investments will be used ethically in a way that can help us tackle climate change, an important step to a better future for us all and for our planet. Thank you for passing this motion without dissent. Thanks, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor London.
Thank you, Provost. Can I begin this afternoon by welcoming the unanimous support of all members from across the chamber for the motion today and recognise the work done by Councillor Goldie in bringing it to the debate. Provost, the climate emergency is one of, if not the greatest threat to our world, and it will take bold, radical and urgent action to address. Indeed, we saw the need for that urgent action illustrated powerfully just recently when our neighbours in Glasgow and indeed Scotland generally welcomed the world for COP26. The recent Code Red report from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change shows the very real threat and heightened risk the climate emergency poses to the planet. It makes clear that even with immediate concerted international action to reduce emissions, global temperature rise can still be limited to 1.5 degrees in the longer term, and so we're at a decisive moment for international efforts to tackle the climate emergency. But local government needs to play its part here in Scotland too, and we collectively need to lead from the front and encourage others locally, nationally and globally to do the right thing. Accordingly, we need to consider what we are doing as an authority, which brings us to the pension fund that's the subject of today's motion. At this point, I want to take the opportunity to thank Friends of the Earth for their helpful briefing ahead of this motion, which provided factual information to inform these important issues. It is clear from the briefing that there is still significant investment by SPF in fossil fuels, and this needs addressed. North Lanarkshire Council has been innovative, as Councillor Goldie said, in its approach to reducing carbon and helping work towards our net zero ambition. Indeed, just recently we heard at Policy and Strategy Committee a comprehensive report which was spoken to by officers from across the Corporate Council on the significant and wide-ranging work being undertaken to help this council respond to the climate challenge. And I want to take the opportunity to thank the officers again for this work. It's important work and glad to see that we are leading. Provost, in considering what more we can do, or indeed what more can be done by the SPF, I consider now the quite historic commentary by the then Finance Secretary John Swinney, who is, as we know, Deputy First Minister, in which he outlined, and I quote, "Local authorities may decide that fulfilment of their public body's duties under the Climate Change Scotland Act requires them to reduce the carbon emissions associated with their funds and investments." And I note that our colleagues in Glasgow, and in particular my friend and colleague Councillor Ricky Bell, the City Government's Treasurer, has taken bold action and stated again, I quote, "We've already put the fossil fuel companies on notice that it's change or be dropped. Standing shoulder to shoulder with our peers across the planet to shift from high carbon investment and put our money where our mouth is by championing investments in the green economy, it's good news for our funds and good news for our climate." And concluding, Provost, by seconding this motion today, I ask that our current representative on SPF pushes for further action on disinvestment in fossil fuels, and perhaps also asks that we be updated as an authority on the action being taken in that same vein to ensure that we're aware of any ongoing action to disinvest. Provost, our planet demands that we take action. Our young people demand that we take action. We need not just listen, we must take action. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much. Councillor Fisher was in the lobby during that, but we'll make sure that he contacts the pension fund as soon after the meeting as possible. Thank you very much. Agenda item 6 is a notice of motion from Councillor Stubbs, seconded by Councillor Carrier. There is no amendment indicated to your motion. Do you still wish to speak, Councillor Stubbs?
I do, Provost. Thank you very much. I'd like to start by thanking colleagues across the chamber for supporting the principle of this idea. I know that many have different concerns and different aspects of the idea of supplying school uniforms centrally, whether it be raw cost, school identity or individual styles that young people are obviously keen to display. That is why the motion is asking simply for a feasibility study to be carried out. I have no doubt there will be challenges to introducing a policy like this, but this council has shown already that we are willing to face up to difficult situations and introduce previously unthinkable initiatives. Club 365 is a prime example. Provost, many of North Lanarkshire Council's employees are required to wear a uniform to work for various reasons. It would be unthinkable for us to insist that employees wear a uniform, which will be branded with the North Lanarkshire logo, and for us to charge them for that. which is why it seems absurd to me that when the uniform policies apply to school pupils, no one has ever challenged the cost to the parents. Around 25% of our 49,000 school pupils receive the uniform grant. This council goes further than others when it comes to the value of the uniform grant, and I welcome every step that is taken to support those who need it. But we must remember that there are many families in our communities who do not qualify for that grant, who will still struggle to pay for uniform. I think it's fair to say that even with the more generous offering in North Lanarkshire, plenty of families struggle with the cost of uniform who are in receipt of the grant. So in my view, the right thing to do is to supply a uniform to each and every school pupil, but we have to find a way to do that. Provost, I want to be clear that this motion isn't solely related to the cost pressures facing parents. It's also about equality for all children and young people across the authority. A quality school uniform is an enhancement to education and will help to address the attainment gap. Just as children can't learn when they're hungry, they also can't learn properly when they're cold or when their clothes are cutting into them. Excuse me. In the last couple of weeks, Wishaw Academy Primary informed parents that all pupils will be supplied with a hooded jumper paid for using the school's PEF money. Is this an appropriate use of PEF? Absolutely. It is a step to ensuring children are warm and comfortable at school. It will also aid in outdoor learning. It is a direct measure that takes steps to close the attainment gap. Should the head teacher be needing to use £3,000 of the PEF budget to fund this? That's the crux of what we're discussing just now. The motion mentions a few things that the feasibility study should report on: cost, procurement issues, and catering for individual style. I hope it goes without saying that these are only examples of what should be researched in order for a paper to be brought back to councillors for consideration. A big issue that's not mentioned but will need to be looked at is absolutely going to be funding. The bulk of the uniform grant funding comes directly from the Scottish Government. We need to know if that would still be the case if we weren't actually paying out the funds to parents, but instead using that money to part fund the supply of uniform to all of our children and young people. I'd like to think it would be. The costing exercise will need to dive deeper than simple arithmetic. I could fairly quickly work out roughly what it would cost to supply uniform based on market prices or by using the current grant level as a guide. Another issue would be ongoing supply. How many pairs of trousers or skirts and shirts or blouses would be supplied at the start of the school year? If someone damages their clothing, how long will it take to get replaced? What about children who grow out of their clothes partway through the year? All of these are very real issues that would need to be looked at. Proper consideration will need to be given to styles. A simplistic cost-saving measure would be black trousers, white shirt, black jumper and a blazer for everyone, with individual school ties. This wouldn't be a suitable solution. School identity is important and it shouldn't be cast aside. It also has to look at catering for the individual preferences and needs of those who will be wearing the uniform. Provost, I'm hopeful that a report, even if it's a draft, will be available at the next Education Committee, but I'm acutely aware of the pressures facing council officers at the moment, so it will be understandable if it's not. If that can't be done, I would ask that at the very least an update is provided at that meeting with the progress that's being made. Thank you again to all colleagues for supporting the motion.
Councillor Carrigan.
Thanks, Provost. I'll be brief as Alan has covered the detail of the motion and his contribution. I'd just like to pick up on the point about the families in our communities who don't qualify for the school uniform grant but still struggle to pay for uniforms. And I know this from personal experience as I was one of those families. With 4 kids close together in age, keeping them clothed appropriately for school was very difficult. I do believe that the move to polo shirts and sweatshirts and jackets was a practical one because I think it actually offered more comfort for the children, but it really did come at a cost. These items are all branded with each school's logo. One supplier charges £7.50 for a polo shirt, £8.95 for a sweatshirt and £22 for a jacket. I think it's reasonable to expect to need 3 polo shirts and 3 sweatshirts for each child. With a jacket, that's £71.35, straight off the mark before you even consider skirts, trousers, shoes, bags, etc. And believe me, the polo shirts in particular need replaced throughout each term. Incidentally, the figures that I've just quoted, they're for one supplier. I'm aware of another one that has a starting cost of £11.50 for a polo shirt. I'm not ashamed to say that there was a very difficult year that my kids only got these items because my sister helped me out and she purchased them for me. I was lucky but not everyone has family that can help, and for that, thanks has to be given to the wonderful community groups set up in our local areas. And I'd like to take this opportunity to pay particular thanks to the team at Cool School Uniforms, who launched their service in 2017 and who I know have discreetly helped so many families in my local community. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank members from across all parties for accepting this motion. Yes, it's the first step, but this council has shown itself to be forward-thinking with initiatives like Club 365, and I'm really pleased that we're leading the way again with a policy which is about bringing equality for children and young people. I look forward to seeing the results of the report and making good progress towards becoming the first council, hopefully of many, to remove this financial burden from parents and provide all children and young people with a quality uniform to attend school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can everybody check they're on mute? Can everybody check they're on mute? I think I'm hearing a phone conversation near enough. Thank you very much, Councillor Carrigan. Can we move on to agenda item 7, which is a notice of motion from Councillor Douglas, seconded by Councillor Cullen. There has been no amendment indicated to your motion, Councillor Douglas. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, Provost, please. It's very brief. Thank you, Provost. It's always been very disappointing to me when memorial wreaths are left for months to deteriorate on and around our cenotaphs and memorials. I hope that the paper will be brought forward to allow the issue to be resolved while giving all due respect to our fallen servicemen and women. I thank everyone for the support for the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Cullen.
Thank you, Provost. Just briefly to add to what Councillor Douglas has said, this is about maintaining the poignancy of the period round about remembrance and giving a suitable period for wreaths to be left at the monuments after remembrance parade before they're actually removed, so that in the run-up to remembrance it's actually new wreaths that are getting put in place. Thank you everybody for supporting this motion.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 8 is a notice of motion from Councillor Woods, seconded by Councillor Lochran. Councillor Woods, there is no amendment to your motion. Do you wish to speak?
Yes, please. You hear me, Provost?
It's on you. That's fine. On you go, Geraldine.
Right. Thank you, Provost. It was brought to my attention by the local charity organisation called Cool School Uniforms, who recycle school uniforms within the Coatbridge area. They informed me that there were a total of 19 primary schools and 4 high schools within this district. Their main problem they're having is redistributing second-hand school uniforms and school attire because the embroidered or stuck on transfer of the individual school name and logo. This is causing a vast amount of wastage on perfectly good school clothing that could be recycled and be a great help to parents on low income. It would also be beneficial to North Lanarkshire Council in helping reducing its carbon footprint. It just seems to me to be a total waste of perfectly good school clothing just because they have a permanent logo on them. This charity began over 4 years ago by asking the community to donate outgrown uniforms. In a matter of weeks, they were inundated. Since then, the community has continued to support this organisation, and in turn, they have assisted almost 200 disadvantaged children per year for 4 years. However, they are receiving too many badged items which they are unable to recycle to needy children and families in other schools. Replacing badged jumpers, polo shirts, gym shorts and t-shirts with self-coloured would enable them to recycle more and help more families and children within North Lanarkshire Council. But I'm asking the full council today to acknowledge this issue, an issue I'm sure everyone would agree could be easily remedied. I'm asking for the full council to consult with the community groups and other charities who recycle the uniform and see if they can find a solution to this problem. Thank you all members for putting my motion forward. Thank you.
Councillor Lochran.
Aye, thank you, Provost. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Right. I support and second this motion today. I'm sure you're all in agreement that it's vitally important that we as local councillors both listen and act on the concerns of our local groups and constituents. In keeping with Councillor Wood's motion, I'd like to reinforce the findings of the Cool Uniform Group through my own experience with the school uniform bank that Councillor Mooney and I supported in Thornywood Ward in the summer break these last 2 years. Again, this vital service was a lifeline to many low-income families in the area and received a great response from the wider community as an opportunity to recycle many pristine garments. The children of Thornywood Ward attend on the whole 3 high schools: Cardinal Newman, Uddingston Grammar and Holy Cross High School, and it is perhaps a fine example of the relevant points made in this motion. All 3 high school uniforms have a black blazer. Currently, the permanent logo is a feature on each school blazer and therefore restricts the transfer and use at the other 2 high schools. I am aware that it was possible in the past to source individual badges that could be stitched over existing logos, but this practice now seems to be dwindling and appears to no longer be possible, as I have sought to source individual badges for one of those such schools without success. Continuing the practice with the permanent logo can create division in our schools between the children wearing higher costed garments with the logo and those children wearing high street non-logo alternative garments. In the interest of equality, it is important we better understand the wider community sentiment on these important issues. From an environmental perspective, we may all be aware of the high level of emissions due to the continued overproduction in the textile industry, and it is currently estimated at a massive 4% of all global emissions. Supporting this motion today will enable the Council to consult on the needs of our community and contribute to a responsible attitude to the net carbon zero emissions going forward. Thank you. I seek your support on this motion.
Thank you very much, and there's no amendment against this one. Agenda item 9 is questions received in terms of Standing Order 50. One question has been received and the response to the question has been circulated to members in advance of the meeting. As this is the last meeting before Christmas, can I take this opportunity to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a happy and safe New Year, and hopefully next year I will be able to meet some of you again in the flesh at council meetings. But right at this moment in time, we're doing the right thing by staying at home and staying safe for our communities. Could also take this opportunity as we get into the festive season and we're going to be sitting down to Christmas lunches, etc. on Christmas Day, to thank the staff of North Lanarkshire Council who will be out there working along with key workers, NHS staff and volunteers to make sure our most vulnerable will not be lonely and will have a service over the Christmas holiday. So can we take this opportunity on behalf of everyone here to thank them for that? And as usual, can I thank the officers for all their help and support over this year, and look forward hopefully again to be meeting up with some next year sometime. So thank you again for your attendance.